The timeline is set for 2025, and while you go about your daily life, the single most critical economic treaty of the last century has quietly taken its last breath. This isn't just a policy change. It is a seismic shift that threatens to vaporize your life savings, slash the value of your paycheck, and fundamentally dismantling the American standard of living as we know it. For 5 decades, a simple unwritten rule governed the global economy. If any nation on Earth wanted to buy oil, they had to pay in US dollars. It didn't matter if you were Germany, Japan, or China. To power your factories and fuel your cars, you first had to acquire American currency. This mechanism created a synthetic, insatiable demand for the dollar that elevated the United States to the status of a financial god, allowing us to produce little, consume everything, and drown in debt without consequence. But that era is over. The system has been terminated. The terrifying reality is that the mainstream media refuses to cover this. Your elected officials are silent. Why? Because if the general public truly understood the magnitude of what has just occurred, they would realize that the America they believe in has already ceased to exist. The expiration of the Petrodollar agreement in 2025 marks the mathematical end of the dollar's global supremacy. Most people will be blindsided by the coming tsunami. But the smart money, the elites, the central banks, the billionaires, they moved their assets long ago. They are piling into gold, acquiring vast tracts of farmland, and moving capital offshore because they know the history that you are about to learn. They understand a lesson that every fallen empire learned through tragedy. Currency is only worth what the world believes it is worth. And right now, that belief is being shattered. Before we expose the deep history that brought us to this cliff edge, if you value uncovering the truths that the financial elite try to bury, do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below if you sense something is wrong with the economy. This is the only way to stay ahead of the collapse. Now, let's decode the pattern. To understand the disaster unfolding in 2025, we have to travel back to the catalyst in 1971. On August 15th of that year, President Richard Nixon interrupted scheduled television programming to deliver a shock to the global financial system. The United States was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. In plain English, the dollar was no longer a receipt for real money. It became a fiat currency, backed by absolutely nothing but faith and promises. Nixon's administration faced an immediate existential crisis. If the dollar was merely green paper with no intrinsic value, why would any foreign nation hold it? Why would global trade continue to be settled in a currency that could be printed into oblivion? The dollar was on the verge of becoming worthless. The solution, a stroke of geopolitical genius and darkness, arrived 3 years later. In 1974, amidst the chaos of the oil crisis, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia with a proposition that would change the world. The deal was simple yet diabolical. The United States offered the House of Saud absolute military protection, advanced weaponry, and a guarantee of their regime's survival against rivals like Iran or Iraq. In exchange, the Saudis had to do just one thing: price every single barrel of oil strictly in US dollars. Not gold, not the yen, not the mark. Only dollars. But the genius of this trap didn't stop with Saudi Arabia. Through the leverage of OPEC, this arrangement spread like a virus to almost every major oil-producing nation on the planet. From Venezuela to Kuwait, from Nigeria to the UAE, the rule became absolute: oil for dollars. This created the petrodollar system, an engine of artificial demand unprecedented in human history. Think about the implications. If Japan needed energy, they had to exchange their yen for dollars. If Europe needed heat for the winter, they had to buy dollars. Every nation was forced to stockpile American currency just to survive. This system gave the United States a superpower that no empire, not Rome, not Britain, ever possessed. We could print trillions of dollars out of thin air to fund massive wars, run gigantic trade deficits, and build a welfare state, yet we never faced hyperinflation. Why? Because we exported our inflation to the rest of the world. We sent them paper, and they sent us cars, electronics, and oil. The petrodollar was not just a trade agreement. It was the true foundation of American hegemony, far more critical than our nuclear arsenal or our aircraft carriers. Controlling the currency meant controlling the lifeblood of the global economy. For 50 years, the machine worked perfectly. The dollar remained the undisputed king, not because our economy was the strongest or our fiscal policy was sound, but because oil is the most traded commodity on Earth. Foreign central banks had no choice but to buy US Treasury bonds with their excess dollars, effectively loaning us money at rock-bottom interest rates to fund our own debt. It was the ultimate financial privilege. However, there was a secret clause to this dominance. It relied entirely on the cooperation of oil producers, and that cooperation has officially ended. The news didn't make the front page of the New York Times, but in financial war rooms, the sirens are blaring. In a move that signals the end of the American era, Saudi Arabia quietly decided not to renew the 50-year-old petrodollar pact. The foundation has cracked. And history shows us that when a currency system based on confidence begins to fracture, it doesn't decline slowly, it collapses vertically. The Saudis aren't acting on impulse. This is a calculated pivot. They have watched the United States weaponize the dollar through sanctions, and they are diversifying. In 2023, they aligned themselves with the BRICS nations Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, an economic bloc explicitly formed to dismantle the dollar's monopoly. We are now seeing oil transactions settled in Chinese yuan. We are seeing discussions of payment in Indian rupees. There are even high-level talks of a new currency basket backed by gold and commodities. Every single one of these moves is a dagger in the heart of the petrodollar. The numbers confirm the terrifying speed of this shift. Look at the data. At the turn of the millennium, over 73% of global reserves were held in US dollars. Today, that number has crashed below 55% and is falling faster than at any point since the end of World War II. This is a run on the bank, but the bank is the United States of America. China has dumped over $300 billion in US Treasuries. Russia has completely liquidated its dollar holdings, converting them into hard assets like gold bullion. Nations are realizing the emperor has no clothes. The dollar is backed by nothing but a promise, and the world is starting to reject that promise. This isn't just geopolitical chess. This is about your ability to feed your family next year. The strength of the dollar in your pocket has nothing to do with your hard work or American productivity. It has everything to do with that artificial demand created in 1974. When that demand evaporates, the supply of dollars remains. We have flooded the world with our currency. If the world decides they no longer need those dollars to buy oil, trillions of them will come flooding back to American shores. This is the recipe for a hyperinflationary event that will make the inflation of the last few years look like a minor inconvenience. Imagine a scenario where foreign central banks stop buying our debt. Who buys the bonds? Who funds the government? The Federal Reserve will have to print the difference. But this time, there is no global sponge to absorb the excess liquidity. The result is a catastrophic loss of purchasing power. The cost of everything imported, which is practically everything you buy at Walmart or Amazon, will skyrocket. Gasoline, medicine, technology, clothing. Prices won't just rise, they will double, triple, or quadruple. Your retirement account, denominated in these weakening dollars, will be hollowed out. And here is the reality that should keep you awake at night. The government is powerless to stop this. The Federal Reserve, the institution tasked with managing your money, has run out of ammunition. They will tell you they are fighting inflation, but their traditional tools are useless when the root cause is the loss of reserve currency status. It is a classic checkmate scenario. If they raise interest rates to defend the dollar, they crash the entire US economy, bankrupting businesses and making the interest payments on our $36 trillion national debt mathematically impossible to pay. But if they lower rates or print money to save the economy, they accelerate the dollar's devaluation and drive the rest of the world away even faster. There is no escape door. The elites know this. That is why they aren't warning you. To panic the herd is to accelerate the slaughter. They need you calm, docile, and invested in the system while they quietly head for the exits. But you don't have to take my word for it. Watch what the smart money is doing, not what they are saying. When the most informed, wealthiest entities on the planet radically shift their portfolios, it is the loudest alarm bell you will ever hear. Look at the billionaires. Bill Gates has quietly become the largest private owner of farmland in the United States. Why? Does he have a sudden passion for tractors? No. He understands that when fiat currency evaporates, land tangible, productive assets that produce food, retains value. Food is the ultimate currency when the paper in your wallet becomes worthless. Look at Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater, the world's largest hedge fund. He has been sounding the alarm on the changing world order and the decline of the American empire for years. He isn't keeping his billions in cash. He is allocating massive capital into gold and foreign assets, betting against the very system that made him rich. Even Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, a man who famously bet on America for decades, has begun aggressively diversifying Berkshire Hathaway's holdings into Japanese trading houses and commodities. These men are not gambling. They are hedging against the collapse of the dollar standard. It isn't just individuals. Look at the corporations. Major tech giants like Tesla and MicroStrategy have converted billions of their cash reserves into Bitcoin. You might think this is just speculation on crypto, but look deeper. This is a vote of no confidence in the US dollar as a store of value. They are looking for a lifeboat, any lifeboat, that isn't tied to the Federal Reserve's printing press. But the most damning evidence comes from the central banks themselves, the very architects of the financial system. In 2023 and 2024, global central banks bought gold at the fastest pace in over half a century. We are talking about thousands of tons of physical bullion being moved into vaults in Russia, China, India, Poland, and Turkey. Why would they trade their safe US Treasury bonds for heavy bars of metal? Because they know the music is stopping. They know the petrodollar is dead. They know that in a crisis, gold is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. They are preparing for a post-dollar world. Meanwhile, your financial advisor is likely still telling you to hold a balanced portfolio of 60% stocks and 40% bonds, denominated in a currency that is burning. If you follow that advice, you will go down with the ship. So, how does the final collapse actually happen? It won't be a straight line down. It will be a cascading failure, a domino effect where each tile knocks over something bigger. We are already past the first domino. Domino 1, the end of exclusivity. Oil producers break the monopoly. This is happening now. China buying oil in yuan, India in rupees. This fundamentally lowers the global baseline demand for dollars. Domino 2, the great dump. Nations holding trillions in US debt realize they are holding a melting ice cube. They start selling US Treasuries. Russia has already exited. China is selling slowly to avoid crashing the market too fast. But the trend is undeniable. When everyone sells bonds, the price crashes, and yields interest rates spike uncontrollably. Domino 3, the debt trap. As interest rates soar, the cost to service the US national debt explodes. We are already paying nearly $1 trillion a year just in interest. If rates double, that becomes $2 trillion, consuming nearly half of all tax revenue. The government becomes insolvent. They cannot pay the military, Social Security, or Medicare without borrowing more. Domino 4, the printing press. Faced with default or austerity, the politicians will choose the only option that keeps them in power. They will force the Federal Reserve to print the money to pay the debt. This is the monetization of debt. It creates a feedback loop from hell. Domino 5, hyperinflation and loss of confidence. As trillions of new dollars flood the system to pay off old debts, inflation creates a vertical line on the charts. Prices don't just rise, they detach from reality. This destroys the last shred of confidence. The American people panic. They dump dollars for anything tangible: food, ammo, gold, crypto, foreign currency. This leads to the nightmare scenario: systemic failure. A currency crisis always triggers a banking crisis, which triggers a political crisis. When the money dies, society unravels. We are seeing the early symptoms everywhere. Food prices up 25-30% in 3 years. Housing becoming a mathematical impossibility for the working class. Credit card debt hitting all-time highs as families borrow just to eat. These aren't transitory economic blips. These are the death throes of a fiat currency reaching the end of its life cycle. Let me give you a history lesson, because arrogance leads us to believe it can't happen here. It happens to every reserve currency. The Spanish real dominated the world in the 16th century. It collapsed due to debt and war. The Dutch guilder ruled the 17th century. It collapsed. The British pound sterling was the global standard for a century until they borrowed too much to fight wars and lost their empire in 2 decades. The US dollar has held the throne since 1944. That is 80 years. We are statistically overdue for a reset. The pattern is identical every single time. Massive military overextension, unpayable debt levels, debasement of the currency to fund the deficit, and finally, a loss of global trust. We have checked every single box. We have bases in 150 countries. We have $36 trillion in debt. We printed 40% of all dollars in existence in just 2 years. The diagnosis is terminal. However, the collapse of 2025 carries a danger that past transitions did not. In the past, there was always a clear successor. When the pound fell, the dollar was ready to take over. It was an orderly transfer of power. Today, there is no clear king to take the throne. The euro is weak. The Chinese yuan is trapped by capital controls and distrust. Bitcoin is too volatile for nation-states. Gold is too slow for digital commerce. We are heading into a multipolar currency order. A chaotic, fragmented world where trade breaks down, supply chains shatter, and trust evaporates. This isn't a recession. It's a paradigm shift. And the terrifying part is the speed. Modern currency collapses don't take decades. They happen in weeks. Look at Venezuela, Turkey, Lebanon, Argentina. Once the confidence breaks, the currency goes to zero, faster than anyone can react. America has more institutional inertia, sure, but we also have the biggest debt bubble in human history. When it pops, the explosion will be heard around the galaxy. When the crisis finally hits American soil, do not expect a slow, manageable decline. It will be a stampede. Imagine a crowded theater where everyone smells smoke at the exact same moment, but there is only one exit door. That is what a currency collapse looks like. And here is the terrifying truth that history teaches us about failing regimes. When the exits get crowded, the government locks the doors. They will not stand by and let you move your wealth into safety. They will attempt to trap the capital within the system to keep the dying heart of the economy beating for just a few more months. We have seen the playbook in every collapse from Argentina to Lebanon. First, they impose capital controls, making it illegal or impossibly expensive to move money across borders. Then, they will nationalize retirement accounts, forcing your 401k and pension funds to buy worthless government bonds under the guise of national security. And if you think your physical assets are safe, remember 1933. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, criminalizing the possession of gold by American citizens. They confiscated real wealth and replaced it with depreciating paper. Do not think for a second they won't do it again. But this time, they have a weapon FDR could only dream of: the central bank digital currency, CBDC. This isn't just digital money, it is programmable control. They will sell it to you as convenient and safe, but in reality, it is a digital prison. A CBDC allows the government to track every cent you spend, tax transactions in real time, and even turn off your ability to buy if you don't comply. It is the ultimate tool to prevent a run on the dollar, because you cannot run from a currency that exists only on their servers. So, what is the counter move? How do you position yourself to not just survive, but potentially thrive, while the rest of the country is wiped out? First, you must ruthlessly eliminate normalcy bias from your psychology. This is the mental glitch that tells you things will go back to normal, because they always have. That belief is poison. The math is broken. The debt is unpayable. The petrodollar is dead. The system is terminal. You must accept that the world is changing permanently. Second, you must diversify out of the paper matrix. I am not giving you financial advice. I am giving you historical precedent. In every currency collapse in the last 500 years, the survivors were those who held assets that had zero counterparty risk. Gold and silver are not investments. They are insurance against government stupidity. They are the only form of money that has survived every empire. Real estate and farmland are wealth you can touch, wealth that produces necessities. Foreign currencies in jurisdictions outside the blast radius of the dollar can act as a hedge. The goal is to own things that have value regardless of what the Federal Reserve decides to print. Third, you must restructure your debt and increase your agility. In a hyperinflationary scenario, fixed-rate debt can technically be inflated away, which sounds good. But that only works if you can survive the chaos in between. If the economy crashes and you lose your income streams, debt becomes a noose around your neck. The safest position is agility. Minimize unproductive debt, maximize liquidity in hard assets, and build skills that are valuable in any economy. Fourth, build your tribe. When complex systems shatter, human beings survive by simplifying and cooperating. Your neighbors, your local community, your family network, these relationships will be more valuable than any stock portfolio. In a post-dollar world, trust is the new currency. Finally, educate yourself. Arm yourself with the pattern. Everything I have laid out here, the history of the petrodollar, the stages of empire collapse, the data on de-dollarization, is public information. It is hiding in plain sight. But 99% of people are too distracted by the circus of politics and entertainment to look. You are now part of the 1% who sees the iceberg before the ship hits it. The petrodollar system was an anomaly in history. A 50-year experiment built on military might and backroom deals, not sound economics. It gave America a standard of living we did not earn, funded by a credit card we never intended to pay off. But the bill has finally come due. The privileges are ending. We are not facing an unprecedented crisis. We are facing the exact same crisis that destroyed Rome, the Ottomans, and the British Empire. The actors change, the technology advances, but the pattern remains absolute. The script is written. The petrodollar died in 2025. The foundation of the American empire has fractured. The collapse is no longer a possibility. It is a mathematical certainty unfolding in real time. The only variable left is you. Will you be a victim of history, or will you be prepared for the next chapter? The answers you need aren't hiding in some uncertain future. They are written in the ashes of the past. And if you stick with me, I will show you exactly where to look.